Hello guys, Justin here, and I thought I'd do a video today talking about things I would probably tell my younger self and things I've learned on the journey. Quite a bit of it through pain, but things I've learned that I would adapt and do differently. And you know, if I don't regret any of the decisions I made in the past, because you have to go through pain in order to learn. But if I was to build a recruitment business now, I would do it completely differently how I set out to build it before. Now let me go back to when I first set up, and when anyone sort of sets up a recruitment business, they do so in trying to reskin a better version of the one that they've left. And when I started up the recruitment business, I was of the belief that I was going to build the biggest, the best marketing, communications, creative recruitment business in the Middle East, and then I was going to expand it internationally, and then someone was going to come along and acquire it. That was sort of the dreams that I've had. And not to say I'm any less ambitious, I'm just a lot smarter about what my hopes and dreams are now. Reality is that what I should have been thinking, and what I'm think like now, is I should have built a really strong, solid cash flow business from the start. You know, a business that was completely geared towards turning over 7 figures and kicking out 50 to 60% profits, giving me lots of money that I could then invest back into the business, but also make investments into as well. Instead, what I did was everything I made, I put back into the business. I threw it all into hiring as many staff as possible. I did it in quite a chaotic fashion, and I didn't put a lot of structure behind it. Now I look at the business that I've got, and you know, it does the same revenue. A 20-person business is the same revenue as when we had 40-person business, and that's across both territories. We run a leaner operation. We run an operation that affords flexibility. We run a business which relies on automation, which relies on marketing. We're a marketing-first recruitment business. We are a business that isn't reliant on cold calling, cold leads. It's completely changed. And so what I would do, talk to my younger self, is I would say, keep it lean. Keep it as small as you possibly can at the start. Learn as much as you can. And though back in those days when I set up, I knew nothing about offshoring. Offshoring has been an absolutely remarkable discovery since COVID for our business. We can hire people for $600 to $1,000 that used to cost us $4,000 to $6,000 a month in Dubai or in Hong Kong. And the beauty of having that offshore team as well is that they're loyal and hardworking. One thing I've learned and what I would tell my younger self is that really hiring recruiters is one of the hardest things you can bloody do. People are remarkably average. People are remarkably unreliable. In fact, if I look at most of the horror stories that I've got from the past 14 years of running the business, it's mostly linked to crappy hires that I've made. It's mostly linked to believing in the businesses that people came from, or believing in a CV and thinking they could work these wonders for our business, when in actual fact they were nothing like as good as the CV made them out to be. And I got completely and utterly led down the garden path on this. So how I would talk to my younger self now is pretty much what I do in my mentoring program. And you look at breaking down different components of the business. Previously, I opened up a 360 recruitment company where everyone was spinning around the hamster wheel, trying to do everything, source candidates, source clients, etc. I wouldn't do that again. I would keep it into the layered model of what I've got now. And that's where you've got offshore delivery team, offshore operations, onshore client servicing, marketing, a mixture of onshore and offshore. Running a really super lean operation that utilizes all those different offshore people with technology kind of linking everything together. So that would have been a remarkable discovery to have made many moons ago. The other thing I would say to my younger self, and I remember when I first set up, I was very driven by ego. I was very driven by what I wanted people to see, how I wanted people to perceive our business. I was very obsessed with the traditional sort of way of looking at the amount of staff I had being a real reflection of how successful my business was doing. That attitude got me nowhere. I was hiring for vanity. I wasn't hiring people who were the best at their job. I wasn't maxing people out. I was just piling numbers upon numbers. And with that, you know, what I also learned was having a lot of people in a business is the biggest headache you can have. I created a business, you know, at one point we were like 40 people in an office, and the middle management structure we were learning as we go within that. There were these splinter groups. There were all sorts of WhatsApp groups that were formed. There were people that were bad-mouthing others. It was just something that I wasn't expected. I wasn't even geared up for. And looking back on it, it was a bit that caused me the most stress. The other thing I learned from the old model that I had before is when you have a business, a 360 recruitment business, or when you have any sort of sales function, you've got to be really careful that the few don't pay for the many. You have to try and hire a real balanced approach. And you also have to make sure that the few that do hire well, that they're not completely, that they're not the Billy Big Spuds, and they're not doing it all without the help of the brand. Because what I've done over the past years is I've created this conveyor belt of competitors that came from our business, MCG Talent, because I was really focused on helping them as individuals and I wasn't building out the brand. What I should have done was help them as individuals, but also utilize the capabilities of the brand, and then made them aware of just how much the brand was helping them become successful, because many of those people that left our business then went set up on their own, crashed and burned because they undervalued the brand that they came from. So I'd have brought in that whole layered approach a lot sooner. I'd have also really made sure if I was going to scale a business, I had a solid middle management team. Well, I think the middle management team that I created back in the day years ago was one that was kind of created on the hoof, and i.e. I realized when the business got to a certain size that it was becoming quite troublesome. So I was plugging people into managerial positions because they hadn't, because I realized I needed that, but also they hadn't had the sufficient training to be put into those positions. So they were put in a really stressful position as well. A billing manager essentially is what I made them, and that, as we all know, is one of the hardest positions to do in recruitment. So I'd have put a lot more structure, and I would not have grown as quickly as I did. I'd have kept it as lean as possible. That's one of the things I would have done before. I touched on what I just mentioned, is I wouldn't have given a monkeys what people thought about me as well. I was really driven by ego, and I think that's one of the big lessons that you learn when you get into your 40s, when you look back from the early days of having a business in your late 20s, early 30s. You would just, so it cared so much to you what people thought, and really that's just one of the things you really shouldn't ever worry about. When I nearly went bust in 2016, I think one of the things I was most upset about was I was worrying about what people might think about me. Well, as I spoke about in another video, yeah, it was a really stressful year. It was a really tough year, but I got through it. And actually, probably people hold you in higher regard for going through a tough year and then coming out the other side of it. And I would say to my younger self, do not be afraid of failure. Do not be afraid of showing emotion. Do not be afraid of showing that you got things wrong, because you know what, pretty much everyone in managerial positions or running businesses get things wrong. No one gets it right all the time. No matter how good other people might show off that they're doing, what I've learned from talking to other founders and from employing people over the years is scratch the surface and people aren't doing half as good as what they make out they are, and they're having exactly the same problems that you would have had. You aren't the only person having those problems. Everyone is having those problems. You're not just the solo victim in all this. You're not the only one being paid late. You're not only the only one having these shoddy recruiters that join you that don't make any money for 6 months. You're not having problems with complacent people. This is a big problem we've had in Dubai over the years. Bringing people over from the UK, hiring them, and then basically thinking they're on holiday the whole time, and just having this dreadful problem with people coming in hungover, lack of ambition, all the goals and aspirations that they have for themselves, they seem to lose when they come to Dubai because they get caught up in the lifestyle here, which has a very, can be a real magnet to get people here, but can have a real bad effect on people once they're here as well. So complacency, I would warn my younger self that there are going to be lots of people that you're going to employ in Dubai, particularly British expats or particularly Western expats, if we're going to call them that, who come out here and think that this is the land of milk and honey, and actually get themselves spoilt, caught up in the lifestyle, and lose their edge. This losing of their edge is a big thing that you'll really, really notice and identify. Again, you don't get this with your offshore team. Yes, you get some headaches with offshore team. You don't get people who get hungover, not working as hard as you thought, and you actually them being hungover on your hard-earned cash that you've been trying to bring into the business. Another thing I would tell my younger self is chill out. Do not become so obsessed with international expansion. Now, it's great that we've got this niche now of Dubai, of having licensing in Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Saudi. But I think back in the day, I was kind of obsessed with putting pins all over the world. I opened up in London. I should never have done that. I was looking at opening up in Japan, Israel. I even was thinking about Latin America, all sorts of different corners of the world. Pre-COVID, I sort of had this obsession with having dots everywhere. And actually, what the world really needs is you to be a small, nimble, successful company that buttons down and focuses on being a niche, a really good expert in a really good area. And I wish I'd have just learned that from the beginning and said from the get-go, we are the experts for the Middle East, we are the experts for Asia, and that's all we ever going to do. I was trying to, I became part of this global brand called DMCG, which I don't really like talking about it because it was a total failure. And the business partners I went in with were complete idiots. But, I wish I'd have never even gone down that path. I built this brand called MCG, and then all of a sudden, just after COVID, I changed it into DMCG and partnered with a company in Australia. I partnered with a company in America and the UK so that we could look like this global powerhouse. Reality is they were two businesses that weren't aligned with ours. Their cultures weren't the same. Even the way that they were structured wasn't the same. And the two owners of the business didn't have the same values and weren't aligned to what we were. I then had to decouple from that business. And all because I had these aspirations and wanting to put pins in the world everywhere. I had to decouple from that business and go back to MCG Talent, then explain to everyone why we were DMCG for a period and then had to move back to MCG Talent. And that was all because of an ego we all had to try and look bigger. I wish I'd have spoken to myself and said, stop worrying about how you're being perceived. Stop worrying about having this passion to look international and global. Be the best at what you can be in your own specialist area. That was a big, big mistake and ended up costing us quite a bit because these guys stole quite a bit of our data actually. The Australian part of the firm, they were called 720, they're called DMCG now. They stole our data and then started pitching to our customers pretending to be us after we'd decoupled into our territories. So the Australian gang were trying to poach my clients in Singapore and Hong Kong. Really messy, really unnecessary, and the perception it gave to staff and to clients wasn't good. That was a big cock up, and I wish I'd have never done that. So, lesson to yourself, to recap, lesson to I'd have given my younger self there would be, don't be obsessed with being global. The other thing I just should have really wised up to was that not a lot of recruitment businesses sell. In fact, 9 out of 10 don't sell. And a whole idea and perception of growing a business to have this big, wonderful exit. Well, it doesn't really happen in recruitment. You need so many things you need a great contract book, really impossible to get in the Middle East. You need a great recurring revenue model. In the Middle East, nobody really wants to give you retainers, really bloody hard, very hard in Asia as well. So all these things were kind of working against us. The visa system out here was very hard. They're making it easier now, but it was never very easy back in the day to build a contracting business. I should have wised up and understood when I opened up in the Middle East, when I opened up in Asia, it was going to be a perm business. That's a great cash flow, small business that you can utilize to generate a lot of money, put into investments or grow a portfolio business. I should have understood that from the beginning and I didn't. I simply thought if I built a business that did 7 figures or a couple of 7 figures and that we built a nice brand, that someone would want to come along and buy us. And not many people want to buy recruitment businesses, particularly perm ones. And even the multiple you get on a recruitment service business now is really not that great. So it's best to just look after your own business, build up as much of your cash reserves as possible and make those investments into other areas of business or into property or into software, etc., where you can grow and build a company. I was an investor into a HR tech business that was acquired by the Access Group. What I learned from that, having a 12-person lean business that within 3 years was acquired by the UK's largest software company because they focused on product, they focused on building something, a really, really decent product. They had no ambitions to be anything else but what they were, and that made them this beautiful niche that another company wanted to buy and bolt into theirs. I wish I'd have understood that a bit earlier on, and my recommendation to any founder, particularly founders I put through our program now, is be the best at what you can be and don't try and be anything outside of that. Another lesson I would give my younger self is try and make yourself as redundant in your business as quickly as humanly possible. And that was a message that I didn't get, certainly in the first few years. I was trying to be involved in absolutely everything. I would It would be really, I would take ages to relinquish responsibility on things. I would make sure I was the front person dealing with important candidates, the front person dealing with important clients, front person interviewing everyone, the front person driving targets, etc. You can't be all these things. And the reality is, if you allow your business to operate where you are the center of everything, where you're sprinkling the fairy dust everywhere, people don't really learn. They just rely on you the whole time. And also you just become nailed to your business. You don't get the opportunity to have any of the things that you when you thought about having your own company, that you wanted to really make the most of, and that is freedom, and that is flexibility. If you are involved in everything, if you are having to sprinkle the fairy dust in every single part of your business, you're never going to have the freedom to enjoy it. If you can get someone in, if you can replace you as quickly as possible, if you can make sure that there's a process in place that people can follow, you make sure there's a good database that everything's registered on, what you're effectively doing is you're making yourself as redundant as possible, as quickly as possible, which means that you might have a saleable asset at the end of it as well. But if you're in the center of everything, no one's going to come along and want to buy your business. No one's going to want to come along and want to help you grow the business, because it's going to be completely reliant by you. The limitations of the business are going to be you, and it's all going to be your fault. I wish I'd have known that earlier as well. It took me a good few years to understand that and start to extract myself out, and I think that's where some of the grey hairs came at that point as well. So that was really a big thing where I look back and go, wow, you know, if I'd have known that, perhaps we'd have been a bit further ahead than what we are. But look, we are where we are, and this is again what I teach people in our program. Try and get in, make yourself as redundant as possible. The last thing we want you to give up is client relationships, but we can offshore everything else. We can bring staff in to take care of everything else. The last thing you give up is the clients, and when you've got someone in to run the business for you, hey, you can have your own freedom, you can move on to the next venture, and you can extract some good amount of money from that business. So there you go. There's some lessons I've learned along the way. There's some things I would tell my younger self. A bit of a ramble in some places, but I hope that was clear. If you've got any questions, if you want to ask me anything, drop a message. And if you want to book in and have a chat with me about my mentoring program, there'll be a link to my calendar in this as well.